Jessica stared out of the airplane window as the city lights of Seoul flickered beneath her. The bustling city, alive with energy, was to be her new home. She glanced at her mother, whose eyes gleamed with excitement. The job transfer had been unexpected, but her mother had embraced it wholeheartedly. Jessica, on the other hand, wasn't sure how she felt about leaving Nigeria behind for an unfamiliar land. Adjusting the strap of her bag as she stepped off the plane, she inhaled deeply. The air was crisp, different from what she was used to. "Welcome to Korea," her mother said, squeezing her hand gently. Their apartment was small but cozy, situated in a lively neighborhood. Her mother had already started working, leaving Jessica to explore the city alone. She had applied to several companies, but was yet to receive a response. Frustrated with waiting, she decided to volunteer at local community centers, hoping to keep herself occupied. It was during one of these volunteer sessions that she met Minjun. The little Korean boy was no older than 5, with chubby cheeks and bright eyes that followed her wherever she went. Unlike other children, who were shy around strangers, Minjun clung to Jessica as if he had known her all his life. He would sit in front during story time, tug at her dress whenever she tried to leave, and demand to hold her hand while they played outside. She adored him, but tried not to get too attached. She didn't want to break his heart when she eventually got a full-time job and had to leave. But fate had other plans. One evening, while Jessica was helping the caregivers clean up, a loud scream shattered the calm atmosphere. Smoke billowed from one of the rooms. Fire. Chaos erupted as caregivers scrambled to get the children out. "Minjun!" someone shouted. Jessica's heart stopped. Without thinking, she dashed inside. Flames licked at the walls, the heat searing her skin as she searched for the boy. And then she saw him, crouched in a corner, eyes wide with fear. "Minjun!" she gasped, rushing toward him. The flames were closing in, but she wasn't leaving without him. She scooped him up, shielding him with her body as she ran. Just as they reached the exit, a wooden beam crashed down, sending embers flying. Jessica felt herself falling, Minjun's terrified scream ringing in her ears before everything went black. She woke up to the rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor. Her body ached, and her throat was parched. Blinking against the harsh hospital lights, she turned her head and met the cold, calculating gaze of a man dressed in an expensive suit. Han-woo. His face was a mask of indifference, but his eyes held an intensity that made her shiver. "You saved my son," he said simply, his voice smooth yet distant. Jessica blinked, struggling to process his words. Minjun's father? Before she could respond, a tiny figure climbed onto her bed. Minjun. He wrapped his small arms around her, burying his face in her chest. "Yama," he mumbled. Jessica's heart nearly stopped. Han-woo's eyes darkened. "He thinks you're his mother now." And just like that, Jessica's life changed forever. Jessica couldn't wrap her head around what was happening. She had only meant to help Minjun, to keep him safe, and now the boy was clinging to her as if she was the only person in his world. The problem? His father, Han-woo, looked less than pleased. "I will make sure you're compensated," Han-woo said curtly, his gaze never leaving hers. "If there's anything you need." Jessica sat up slightly, wincing at the dull ache in her body. "I don't need money," she interrupted. "I just wanted to make sure Minjun was okay." Han-woo raised a brow, as if her response surprised him. He studied her for a long moment before exhaling sharply. "Regardless, I owe you." Before Jessica could protest further, Minjun lifted his head. "Yama," he said again, his voice small but firm. He reached for Jessica's hand, squeezing it tightly. "Minjun, I'm not your mother," Jessica said gently, her heart aching at the way his tiny face crumpled. "But I want you to be," he insisted, his large eyes filled with unshed tears. Han-woo stiffened. "Minjun." His tone was stern, but the little boy refused to let go of Jessica. Jessica bit her lip, torn between comforting the child and stepping back from whatever strange situation she had found herself in. "Minjun, I have to go home soon. Your father will take care of you." Minjun shook his head vigorously. "No. Appa is always busy. I want to stay with Yama." Hanwoo rubbed his temples, clearly frustrated. Jessica could see it now, the exhaustion in his eyes, the stiffness in his shoulders. He wasn't just a billionaire, he was a man carrying a burden. Before she could say anything else, a knock on the door interrupted them. A tall woman in a tailored dress stepped in, her gaze scanning the room before settling on Jessica with thinly veiled disdain. "Who is she?" the woman asked coldly. Hanwoo sighed. "Mother." Jessica's stomach twisted. This was not how she imagined meeting the family of the child she had saved. Jessica could feel the weight of Hanwoo's mother's gaze as the room fell into an uncomfortable silence. The older woman took a slow, deliberate step forward, her posture rigid, her eyes sharp. "I asked a question," she repeated, her voice icy. "Who is this woman, and why is my grandson clinging to her like she belongs here?" Hanwoo exhaled, his expression impassive. "Mother, this is Jessica. She saved Minjun's life." The older woman's lips pressed into a thin line. "And now my grandson thinks she's his mother?" Jessica shifted awkwardly, her hands resting on Minjun's tiny fingers. "I never told him that. He just—" "I don't care what he thinks," the woman interrupted. "You've done enough. Thank you for your service, but you can leave now." Minjun clung tighter to Jessica, his little body trembling. "No, I want Iyama." Hanwoo's mother flinched at the word. "Hanwoo, get control of your son." Hanwoo remained silent, his gaze flickering between his mother and Jessica. Then, without warning, he spoke. "Minjun needs stability. And right now, he wants Jessica." Jessica's head snapped up. "Wait, what are you saying?" Hanwoo met her eyes, his expression unreadable. "I'm offering you a job. Be Minjun's caretaker, live with him, take care of him, until he adjusts." Jessica's breath hitched. "Live with you?" Hanwoo's mother gasped. "You can't be serious." Hanwoo ignored her. "I'll pay you well. You'll have everything you need." Jessica's heart pounded. This was insane, but the look on Minjun's face made her hesitate. She was about to enter a world she never expected. Jessica stood in front of the massive wrought iron gates, her suitcase feeling heavier than ever. She still couldn't believe she had agreed to this arrangement. Living under the same roof as Hanwoo and Minjun? It was surreal. The Han estate was nothing like she had imagined. It wasn't just luxurious, it was intimidating. The sheer size of the mansion, with its pristine glass windows and modern architecture, made her feel completely out of place. The gates opened silently, and she stepped in hesitantly. She was greeted by a row of neatly uniformed staff, all standing in perfect formation. A tall woman with sharp features stepped forward. "You must be Jessica," the woman said curtly. "I am Mrs. Park, the head housekeeper. Follow me." Jessica swallowed, gripping the handle of her suitcase tighter. Mrs. Park's tone wasn't exactly welcoming, but she wasn't outright hostile either. As they walked through the long corridors, Jessica took in the lavish interior. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, and priceless artworks. Finally, they arrived at a door. Mrs. Park pushed it open, revealing a spacious but minimally decorated bedroom. "This will be your room," she said briskly. "The young master's room is just down the hall. You are expected to tend to him as needed, but there are boundaries. You will address Mr. Hanwoo formally and always be mindful of your position." Jessica blinked at this strict tone but nodded. "I understand." Mrs. Park gave her one last scrutinizing look before leaving. Jessica sighed, setting her suitcase down. Before she could even sit down to catch her breath, a familiar voice rang through the hallway. "Yama." Jessica barely had time to turn before Minjun barreled into her, wrapping his tiny arms around her waist. She let out a soft laugh, ruffling his hair. "Minjun, did you miss me already?" He nodded vigorously. "Come play with me." Jessica glanced at the door, half expecting Hanwoo to appear and remind her that she was here for a job, not playtime. But when no one came, she smiled down at the boy. "All right, but just for a little while." Minjun beamed, tugging at her hand and pulling her out of the room. An hour later, Jessica found herself in the vast garden, laughing as Minjun insisted on showing her his favorite hiding spots. It was peaceful, until a deep voice interrupted them. "You're settling in quickly." Jessica turned to find Hanwoo watching her, his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. She straightened. "I was just keeping him occupied." Hanwoo stepped closer, his gaze flickering to Minjun, who was now distracted with a butterfly. "He likes you more than I expected." Jessica crossed her arms. "You say that like it's a bad thing." His lips quirked up slightly. "Not necessarily." For a moment, there was silence between them. Jessica shifted under his gaze, feeling an odd tension in the air. Before she could say anything else, Hanwoo's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression instantly darkening. "I have to go," he said, "but we'll talk later." Jessica frowned as he walked away. Something about his tone unsettled her. She had a feeling that moving in was just the beginning of something much more complicated. Jessica adjusted to life in the Han mansion faster than she expected. The staff kept their distance, always polite but never too familiar. Minjun, however, remained as attached as ever. He insisted on sitting next to her at meals, wanted her to read him bedtime stories, and followed her around the house whenever possible. But it was Hanwoo's presence that unsettled her the most. Every evening, when he returned from work, there was a brief moment, just seconds, where their eyes would meet across the dinner table. His gaze was unreadable, intense, and it always made her stomach twist. He never lingered long, never said much, but there was something about the way he observed her that made her feel exposed. One night, after tucking Minjun into bed, Jessica made her way back to her room. As she reached for the door handle, a deep voice stopped her. "Jessica." She turned quickly, startled to find Hanwoo standing at the end of the hallway. He was still dressed in his work attire, his tie loosened, his shirt sleeves rolled up. It was the most unguarded she had ever seen him. "Yes?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. He stepped closer, the dim hallway lights casting shadows over his sharp features. "Are you settling in well?" Jessica nodded. "Yes. Minjun has been wonderful." Hanwoo's lips pressed into a thin line. "That's good." He hesitated, his gaze flickering to the floor for a split second before locking onto hers again. "You should be careful." Jessica frowned. "Careful?" "My mother," he said simply. "She doesn't like people getting too close to Minjun. She may try to make things difficult for you." Jessica exhaled. "I figured as much." Hanwoo's expression softened just a little. "I'll handle her. Just don't let her get to you." Jessica studied him for a moment. Despite his cold exterior, there was something protective about the way he said it. A small warmth settled in her chest. "I can take care of myself," she assured him. He nodded, stepping back. "Good night, Jessica." "Good night." As he walked away, Jessica let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She pressed a hand to her chest, her heart pounding. She had a feeling things were about to get much more complicated. Jessica's first official encounter with Hanwoo's mother came sooner than expected. It started with a formal invitation delivered to her by Mrs. Park. "The madam wishes to see you for tea this afternoon," Mrs. Park said, her expression unreadable. Jessica swallowed. The madam. Hanwoo's mother. The woman who had abandoned Minjun, yet still wielded influence over the family. Mrs. Park gave a small nod. "It is unwise to refuse." Jessica hesitated before exhaling. "I understand." Later that day, she found herself sitting stiffly in the grandiose tea room, across from a woman whose cold elegance could freeze an entire room. Lady Han, as she was addressed, was dressed immaculately in a pale blue hanbok, her sharp eyes assessing Jessica like a specimen under a microscope. "You are an interesting choice," Lady Han finally said, setting down her porcelain cup. "And quite misplaced." Jessica kept her expression neutral. "I am here for Minjun." Lady Han smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Are you?" Jessica felt an unspoken threat in her words, a warning that she had stepped into a world where she wasn't welcome. And yet, she met the older woman's gaze head-on, refusing to cower. Because no matter what Lady Han believed, Jessica was here to stay. Jessica's hands trembled slightly as she set down her teacup. The tension in the room was suffocating, but she refused to show weakness in front of Lady Han. The older woman's gaze was sharp, scrutinizing every movement, every breath Jessica took. It was clear she wasn't welcome here. "You may believe that kindness alone will secure your place here," Lady Han said smoothly, her fingers delicately adjusting the bracelet on her wrist. "But this family is not built on emotions. It is built on power, tradition, and legacy." Jessica met her gaze evenly. "I'm not here to disrupt your traditions. I care about Minjun. That's all." Lady Han chuckled softly, but there was no warmth in it. "Minjun is a Han. He does not need an outsider's pity." Jessica clenched her hands into fists beneath the table. "With all due respect, Minjun needs love and care, not just a powerful name." Lady Han's smile faltered, just slightly, before she stood gracefully. "Let me give you a word of advice, Miss Jessica," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "People like you, people who do not understand our world, always get hurt when they step into it. I suggest you consider your position very carefully." Jessica watched as Lady Han glided out of the room, leaving behind a silence so heavy it pressed against her chest. She exhaled, realizing only then how tightly wound she had been. Later that evening, Jessica found herself in the garden, seeking solace in the quiet. The sky was a deep navy blue, stars scattered like tiny diamonds. She wrapped her arms around herself, her thoughts a whirlwind. She had known from the beginning that this wouldn't be easy, but Lady Han's words had made things clear. She was seen as a temporary presence, a foreigner who didn't belong. Was she truly ready to fight against that? "You shouldn't let her get to you." Jessica jumped slightly at the voice, turning to see Hanwoo standing a few feet away. He had removed his suit jacket, his sleeves rolled up, giving him a slightly unguarded look. "She was testing you," he continued, stepping closer, "to see if you would break." Jessica sighed. "And did I pass?" His lips quirked up in a ghost of a smile. "You're still here, aren't you?" She let out a small chuckle, shaking her head. "I don't know how you deal with her." Hanwoo exhaled, his expression turning serious. "She's not my concern. Minjun is." He hesitated before adding, "And so are you." Jessica's breath caught at the way he said it. Soft, deliberate. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the air between them was charged with something unspoken. A pull, magnetic and undeniable. But before she could respond, a tiny voice interrupted them. "Yama?" Minjun stood in the doorway, rubbing his sleepy eyes. "I had a bad dream." Jessica immediately moved toward him, kneeling down.
"Oh, sweetheart.
"Come here." Minjun wrapped his small arms around her, and she lifted him easily, resting his head against her shoulder. She glanced back at Hanwoo, expecting him to say something, but he was simply watching her, an unreadable expression on his face. "Good night, Jessica," he murmured at last before turning away. As Jessica carried Minjun back to his room, her heart pounded in her chest. One evening, as the moonlight filtered through the garden, Jessica found herself once again seeking refuge outside. The evening had been particularly hard. Hanwoo had been absent for most of the day, and Minjun had fallen asleep early, leaving her with an unsettling emptiness. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps behind her. She turned, expecting to see one of the staff, but instead, she found Hanwoo standing there, his dark eyes studying her in the same way he always did. "Why are you out here alone?" His voice was low, almost unreadable. Jessica shrugged, folding her arms around herself. "Just needed some air." Hanwoo took a step closer, his gaze flickering toward the stars above them. "You're not alone. You have me." There it was again, the soft, unspoken promise that made Jessica's heart skip a beat. But before she could respond, a loud crash echoed from the hallway, followed by shouting. Without warning, Hanwoo turned on his heel and rushed inside, with Jessica hot on his heels. They arrived in the hallway to find Mrs. Park and another staff member struggling to restrain a man who was clearly angry. "What's going on?" Hanwoo demanded, his voice authoritative as always. Mrs. Park glanced up, her face tight. "It's one of the contractors from the construction site. He's causing a scene. The man, clearly agitated, turned to Han-woo. You think you can just push me around? I built this house, and now you want to cut my pay? You're nothing but, The man's words were cut off as Han-woo took a step forward, his expression cold and dangerous. Enough. The room fell silent, and even the staff members seemed to hold their breath. Han-woo's presence was like a force of nature, commanding attention without needing to raise his voice. Without another word, he turned to Mrs. Park. See to it that he's removed. I'll deal with him tomorrow. As the staff escorted the contractor out, Jessica couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation. Han-woo had a power to him that was undeniable, but there was also a loneliness about him that she hadn't noticed before. As the tension in the room dissipated, she found herself standing next to him, the space between them narrowing. His eyes flickered to hers, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air seemed charged with something unspoken, a simmering intensity that neither of them could ignore. Thank you for handling that, Jessica finally said, breaking the silence. Han-woo nodded, but his gaze remained fixed on her. You're welcome. His voice was softer now, and he seemed to be grappling with something, but he didn't speak it. Jessica felt the familiar tension creeping in, the pull she had been trying to ignore. She opened her mouth to say something else, but the words caught in her throat. And then, in a moment of madness, Han-woo reached out and gently cupped her face. His thumb traced the line of her jaw, his touch feather-light but electrifying. For a second, time seemed to freeze. Neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke. The world outside the mansion seemed to disappear, leaving just the two of them in that charged moment. But just as quickly as it had come, it was gone. Han-woo stepped back, his face returning to its usual unreadable mask. We should go back inside, he said, his voice hoarse. Jessica nodded mutely, her heart still racing in her chest. She turned away first, walking back toward the mansion, the sound of her footsteps mingling with the heavy silence between them. As she lay in bed that night, she couldn't shake the feeling that things were shifting between her and Han-woo. The boundaries that had once seemed so clear were becoming increasingly blurry. And no matter how hard she tried to convince herself otherwise, she couldn't deny it any longer. She was falling for him,